Hey, this is neat. I didn't even plan this. It just worked out this way. Last week, I reviewed Spectre of the Gun, and this week I'm reviewing the Paradise Syndrome, which means I'm closing out the year with cowboys and indigenous people. This is a review of the Star Trek The Original Series episode, The Paradise Syndrome. If you have not seen this episode, and you don't want to know what happens in it, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. An American TV show from the 1960s produced almost entirely by white men, depicting the show's white hero moving in with a community of people descended from Native Americans? What could possibly go wrong? Kirk, Spock, and McCoy beam down to a beautiful Earth-like planet that is threatened by a massive asteroid, which is on course to strike the planet in approximately 2 months. They investigate a mysterious metal obelisk standing in a clearing. It's constructed of some kind of metal Spock's never seen before. His tricorder can't even scan its interior, in fact. It was apparently erected by some alien civilization far more advanced than the people living on this planet now. Speaking of whom, there they are. Look at that charming little village. And the people. McCoy notices they bear a striking resemblance to, as he calls them, American Indians. Spock confirms this, observing that their community seems to include elements of the Navajo, Mohican, and Delaware peoples. Kirk seems quite taken with them. Wouldn't it be great to just live here with them? Just have a nice, peaceful life with no problems or big decisions? Respectfully, Captain, that is a reductive and patronizing view of the way of life of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. In fact, no problems or big decisions. Wouldn't it be great? I made that last bit up. Spock doesn't actually say that, or anything like that in the episode. He should, or somebody should, but nobody does. McCoy describes Kirk's reaction to the native village as a form of the Tahiti syndrome, which is when people with stressful, high-pressure lives daydream about trading it all in for what they believe would be a simpler, less demanding existence. Anyway, time to get back to the Enterprise and divert that asteroid. Every second counts, and the longer they wait to act, the more difficult their task will be. But first, Kirk wants one more look at that obelisk. While he's up on the platform of the obelisk, he pulls out his communicator and calls the Enterprise, and the next instant, a trap door opens at his feet and Kirk falls down into a chamber beneath the obelisk. The door closes immediately, trapping Kirk inside. There is technology in the chamber, a control panel. Kirk pulls himself up, but hits the wrong button or something because he is struck by amnesia lightning, which is also knock you out lightning. Spock and McCoy search for Kirk on the surface, but they can't find him, and they're out of time. If they delay any longer, the Enterprise may not be able to divert that asteroid, and then everyone on this planet will die, including Kirk, wherever he is. Kirk wakes up, can't remember who he is. The door to the obelisk opens automatically, and he climbs out just in time to be discovered by 2 women from the village, one of whom, Miramani, goes up to him and says, "Hi, Magic Monument guy. We are your people. We've been waiting for you." Kirk's like, "Okay, sure, I guess," and goes back with them to the village. Miramani takes Kirk to see the Elder. Salish, the medicine chief, is also there. The Elder says to Kirk, "So we have a legend that says that a god will emerge from the temple to save us when the sky grows dark. That's you, right?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." "I bet it's you." Right then, a child is brought in who fell into the lake. He was pulled out of the water, but not in time from the looks of it. Salish, the medicine chief, pronounces the child dead. But Kirk says, "Hold your horses." If you have those. Maybe not. I didn't see any on my way in. Hey, I remember horses. What was I doing? Oh, yeah, the dead kid. Kirk performs CPR on the drowned kid, and the kid wakes up. The Elder is like, "See, I told you, only a god can give the breath of life. In fact, you know what? You should be our medicine chief, not this loser. Give him the head badge. Give it to him." And Miramani, the priestess of the tribe, snatches the head badge off of Salish and gives it to Kirk. Oh, Salish don't like that. Another thing that Salish don't like is that he was engaged to Miramani, but now Miramani is telling him we're not engaged anymore because our tradition says the priestess, which is me, marries the medicine chief, which ain't you. Magic Monument guy is my main squeeze now because he put a badge on it. And by it, I'm referring to his own head. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, every attempt to divert or destroy the oncoming asteroid has failed, and Spock has burned out the engines in the effort. Now there's only one chance left. Spock tells McCoy that his plan is to return to the planet under impulse power, since the warp drive is fried. The trip will take almost 2 months, and they'll arrive only 4 hours ahead of the asteroid. But hopefully, in that time, Spock will be able to decipher the strange writing they found on the surface of that obelisk near the village. That obelisk holds the key to saving the planet, Spock says. McCoy's like, "You're just making that up. Do you have a better idea?" So the Enterprise spends the next 2 months flying back to the planet with the asteroid right behind it. Kirk, or Kirok, as he is known to the people of the village, gets married to Miramani. He wears King Tut's robe to the wedding and everything. Then he spends the next 2 months with Miramani, doing it on the floor with the door open so everyone can hear like the horned-up freak he is. Then one day, Miramani gives him some bad news. She's pregnant, and it's his. Not wanting to hurt her feelings, Kirk reacts as though this is actually good news, and she seems happy. But the sky grows dark, and the wind picks up as the big asteroid approaches. The village elder goes to Kirk like, "Okay, Kirok, you're up." "What?" Miramani's like, "It's just like the legend said. It's time for you to go to the temple, rouse the temple spirit, and make the blue flame come out." But I don't know how to do any of that. And Salish is there like, "See, I told you he's a fake!" So, not wanting to get shown up by his wife's ex, Kirk goes to the obelisk. He has no idea what he's supposed to do, so he just kind of stands there and shouts, "I am Kirok!" at the sky a few times. Salish watches from the edge of the woods, then runs back to the village to round up a mob. The mob returns shortly. Salish denounces Kirk as a false god, and they all promptly begin stoning him. Miramani runs to Kirk's side and tries to calm the mob, but Salish is like, "You can die with your fake-ass husband," and stoning resumes. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, Spock has finally figured it out. The writing on the obelisk corresponds to musical notes. Once he realized that, Spock was able to translate the text, and it turns out the obelisk was left there by a powerful ancient race called the Preservers, whose jam it was to rescue civilizations threatened with extinction by transplanting them to new worlds. The Preservers chose this planet to be the new home of these indigenous Americans, but there was only one problem. The planet's orbit brings it into the path of a massive asteroid every so often, so the Preservers solved that problem by building an asteroid deflector. The obelisk. McCoy's like, "Wow, Spock, that thing you made up a couple of months ago turned out to be true." Spock and McCoy beam down beside the obelisk in the middle of the stoning of Kirk and Miramani. The mob flees at their appearance. McCoy examines Kirk and Miramani. Kirk seems fine, except for his memory loss, but Miramani is mortally wounded, internal injuries or something. Spock mind melds with Kirk to restore his memory, leading to one of the great moments of unintentional hilarity in all of Star Trek, when, in this time of maximum crisis, with an asteroid bearing down on this planet, we get Spock and Kirk simultaneously screaming, "I am Kirok!" at each other as their minds merge. It works, though. Spock breaks the mind meld, and Kirk sits up, and he remembers everything. He orders McCoy to take care of Miramani, and he and Spock figure out that it was his calling the Enterprise on the communicator that triggered the obelisk to open. By sheer coincidence, the phrase, Kirk to Enterprise, contains the exact sequence of tones needed to activate the door. How about that? Once inside, Spock, who can read the control panel now, activates the deflector beam, and the asteroid is knocked safely away. Kirk goes to Miramani's side. She doesn't have long to live, but she tells Kirk that she'll get better, and they'll have a long life together, and it'll be all head badges and King Tut robes and open-door floor sex. Kirk's like, "Sounds good to me," and goes in for a smooch. And thus, with a kiss, she died. The end. This is an interesting episode because as far as the pacing and plot structure and the production, it's really quite good. But as far as how it treats its subject matter, it's really not. Let me start with the good stuff. I love the amount of location shooting we get in this episode. Miramani's planet is meant to be a duplicate of Earth, same environment, same plant life, etc. So instead of shooting on a soundstage, the exterior scenes set in and around the village and the obelisk were filmed at the Franklin Canyon Reservoir outside of Los Angeles. Like Vasquez Rocks, it's been a popular filming location for decades. Dozens of films and TV shows have shot scenes at the reservoir and the surrounding park. The lake was Andy and Opie's fishing hole in the opening credits of The Andy Griffith Show. It's a beautiful location and a nice change of pace for the show. The plot is well put together and nicely paced. This episode doesn't drag or feel like it's stretching, which, as I've mentioned in the last few reviews, is a very common issue with classic Trek episodes. The story takes place over a much longer time period than is typical for a single Trek episode, but we cut between the action on the planet and the action on the Enterprise, keeping both of those parallel plots moving along, and the episode crams a lot into this 1 hour without feeling crowded or rushed. Beyond the pacing and the structure, the plot is built on an intriguing concept. The Enterprise tries and fails to divert a planet-killer asteroid and is forced to return to the planet at sublight speed, taking months to arrive with the asteroid close behind. Meanwhile, Captain Kirk is trapped somewhere on that planet, and if they fail, not only will everyone else on the planet die, Kirk will die too. Not only that, Kirk isn't actually trapped there. He likes it. His longing for a simpler life away from the burdens of command adds a bit of depth to his character. Sure, he loves being the captain. It's where he belongs. He's devoted to his ship and his crew. But the pressure does get to him, and he sometimes wishes he could just walk away from it. In this episode, he gets his chance. For a time. The concept is solid, parallel stories, one with Kirk living out an idyllic alternate life that we all know is destined to be short-lived, the other with Spock and McCoy on the Enterprise worrying about how to find Kirk, how to destroy or divert that asteroid, and what to do if they fail. The execution in terms of pacing and production is excellent, but the choice to make the people on the planet descendants of Native Americans and the manner in which the episode depicts them is a problem. It's another example of the creators of Star Trek having their hearts in the right place, but being undone by their own biases. The portrayal of the Native American characters in the episode isn't negative per se. Superficially, it's quite positive. In fact, Kirk, the hero of the show, views their way of life as highly desirable. He wishes he could live the way they do and seems utterly contented when he does get to live with them for a while. The residents of the village aren't warlike, bloodthirsty savages. They're a peaceful, spiritual people. But therein lies the problem. They are a reduced, romanticized, white person's fantasy of what an ideal Native American community would be like. They are peaceful, yes, but they're also benignly ignorant. Kirk arrives, and even though his brain don't work all the way, he brings with him medical and technical and agricultural advancement. There's a scene between Kirk and Miramonte where it's established that in his time in the village, he has introduced the oil lamp and techniques for food preservation and is planning an irrigation system to use the lake to water their crops. It's true that historically, with a few exceptions, Native American peoples didn't use oil lamps and didn't use irrigation. I'm pretty sure at least some of them knew a thing or two about food preservation, but that's not the point. The problem isn't whether or not Kirk introducing these innovations contradicts the actual history of these cultures. I don't care about that. The problem is Kirk, the white guy, the visitor from civilization, is the bringer of knowledge and enlightenment. He teaches these poor, primitive people a better way of living. He comes and lifts them out of the mud because they could never have done it without him. And they worship him as a god. Until they don't, at which point they instantly become a mob of murderers. Simple-minded, easily manipulated, superstitious reactionaries. They're as bad as modern Americans! Ha ha! Oh, but I kid. Only not really. Also, Spock stares at the letters on the outside of that obelisk for a couple of months and figures out that they're musical notes and deciphers what they mean, but the people in this village have been living next to that thing for centuries, and despite all that time and numerous generations of them living and dying, they still don't have the first clue what it is or what it does. Miramani is the embodiment of the problem. She, like the village itself and all of its people, exists only to serve Kirk's story. She is there to make him happy, to fulfill his fantasy, and then to be the means by which that fantasy is taken away in order to feed Kirk's tragedy. She dies because it will be sad for Kirk. And also, it's just neater that way. Once Kirk's memory returns, it's a foregone conclusion that he can't stay on this planet. He must return to the Enterprise. But he can't have a wife and eventually a child on the ship. This is Star Trek. He's got to be the swashbuckling, unattached pulp sci-fi hero. The thing is, just abandoning his wife and unborn child on that planet isn't a very noble thing to do. So, the episode allows Kirk to extricate himself from any difficult choices or any actions unbecoming for an uncomplicatedly heroic lead protagonist by simply killing Miramani and their would-be offspring in the end. She exists for Kirk, and when Kirk doesn't need her anymore, she's dead. Like I said, this is far from the most offensive portrayal of Native Americans in a film or TV series. It seems obvious to me that the creators of this episode meant to show the people of the village in a positive light, as a culture that had value and a right to exist. But there's nothing in the episode that remotely qualifies as a critique or commentary on the persecution and displacement and mass murder of indigenous peoples throughout American history. Spock notes that this community is here because of the actions of the preservers, but nothing is said about why the cultures of these particular people needed to be preserved in the first place. The Paradise Syndrome is a complicated and problematic episode. It excels in some ways, but fails terribly in others. It's an episode worth watching and thinking about. It's an example of how even storytellers with the best of intentions can see those intentions thwarted by ignorance and prejudice which they probably aren't even aware of. Even a show like Star Trek, one of the most self-consciously progressive TV series ever made, is capable of producing an episode that plays as condescending and racist. Benign condescension is still condescension, after all, and unintentional racism is still racism. The Native Americans of the Paradise Syndrome exist so that Captain Kirk and his crew can save them, and that's all. In the process, the people of the village learn from Kirk and his advanced ways, while Kirk apparently learns nothing from them. In the world of the Paradise Syndrome, there is nothing which Kirk could learn from the Native Americans. He already knows everything he needs to know, including the most important thing, the thing we've known the whole time as well, that he doesn't belong there. Those are my thoughts on the Paradise Syndrome. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. This is the last review of this batch of reviews looking at episodes featuring alternate Earths. It's also the last review of this first year of retro reviews. I'm going to take a 2-week break from retro reviews, not from my other videos, just these. And then on January 18th, I'll be back to begin a brand new batch of reviews looking at some bottle episodes from throughout the Star Trek franchise, starting with a review of the first Star Trek bottle show, also one of the earliest Star Trek episodes, period, from Season 1 of Star Trek the Original Series, The Naked Time. That's coming up on January 18 after a 2-week break. Thank you all so much for watching and sharing and commenting on these retro reviews this year. You have helped to make them a ton of fun for me to do. I look forward to continuing with them well into the future. I've got the entire 2024 review schedule all plotted out. I can't wait. See you in a few weeks, folks. Happy New Year.